The town of Westmore had always lived quietly and inconspicuously, as if it had been cut out of a map and forgotten by everyone except those who were born here. It was surrounded by forests, swamps, and lakes, in which the heavy gray clouds of the autumn sky were reflected. The residents were accustomed to solitude, to the fact that the road to the big world passes through cracks in the asphalt and bridges trembling over murky water. But in that year, when the leaves turned brown early and the first snow fell in October, Westmore ceased to be quiet. Fear settled in it. First, a girl named Emily disappeared. She was 12. She was returning home from school through a forest path. Her parents found her backpack, neatly placed at the roots of an old oak. There were no signs of a struggle, only the footprints of sneakers, too big to belong to a child, going deep into the forest. The police searched for her for 3 days, combed the forest with dogs, but they followed the trail and suddenly stopped, beginning to howl. A week later, Michael Reed, a mechanic known to everyone, disappeared. His pickup truck was found on a dirt road with the door open. The radio was playing an old country melody, and nearby in the mud, the same sneaker tracks. People began to whisper. The old people remembered stories that once seemed like fairy tales, about a creature with a shark's head and long legs and sneakers, which came out of the forest when it became too quiet in the town, when fear and darkness thickened so much that they could be touched with hands. Jason Miller didn't want to believe in fairy tales. He was 27, he worked in a car service and lived alone in a house on the outskirts. But one evening, when he was returning home late, his car stalled in the middle of a forest road. He went out to check the engine, and then he heard footsteps. Clear, heavy thuds of soles on the wet ground. He thought it was a person, but the steps were too measured, too loud, as if someone was deliberately walking so that he would be heard. Jason turned on the flashlight and directed the beam between the trees. Something was standing there. A tall figure, almost 3 meters tall, the head of a shark. Dead bead eyes. A mouth stuffed with sharp teeth that gleamed in the light of the flashlight. A human body, sinewy, long arms with claws, and below legs and white sneakers stained with dirt and blood. The creature looked at him, not moving, and then stepped forward. Jason recoiled. The flashlight slipped out of his hands. He jumped into the car and turned the ignition key. The engine started on the 3rd try, and he tore off. Behind him he heard the stomping, loud, fast, relentless. It seemed the monster was running nearby, but remained invisible in the dark. Only when the first lanterns of the town appeared, the sound disappeared. Jason didn't tell anyone about what he saw until his neighbor Henry disappeared. The old man was found in the house, but not entirely. His upper part was lying in the armchair, and from the waist down nothing was left. On the floor, footprints of sneakers and puddles of blood. The town began to suffocate from horror. People closed doors and windows, stopped going out in the evenings. But the disappearances continued. One morning, an entire family was missing. Their house was open, the food on the table unfinished. In the children's bed, a teddy bear remained, soaked with something dark. On the porch, the same tracks. Jason tried to find an explanation. He spoke with Sarah, the librarian, the only one who didn't laugh at his stories. She showed him old newspaper clippings. 50 years ago, there were disappearances in these parts. And then they also talked about a monster in sneakers. It's not just a story, said Sarah, running her fingers over the yellowed paper. It's something that returns. Every time people forget to be afraid, it reminds them of itself. They went to the archive together and found a mention of an ancient Indian legend. A ghost hunter having taken the form of a shark, came ashore to take revenge on people. But why he wore sneakers, no one knew. Maybe it was a mockery. Maybe he stole shoes from the victims. Maybe that's how the ghost pretended to be a part of our world. One night, Jason heard footsteps right outside his window. He lay, holding his breath, and counted the thuds of the soles on the ground. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. He gathered his courage and looked out. In the moonlight, fresh tracks were visible on the grass, leading towards the forest. The next day, the body of a teenager was found in the town. His chest was torn apart, bones ground, as if someone huge was chewing him, not caring about swallowing. On the asphalt, again footprints of sneakers. Panic grew. People began to leave, but many did not make it. Their cars were found empty, with open doors. On the road, traces. Jason and Sarah decided to act. They found a record in the diary of one of the survivors from half a century ago. The monster can only be driven away by water, where it first came out, at the old lake, overgrown with reeds. They went there at night. The air was heavy. It smelled of rot and water. The reeds rustled, as if whispering among themselves. And then they heard the stomping. It came from the depths of the forest, closer and closer. Branches were breaking. Birds were taking off, screaming. And suddenly he came out. The monster was even bigger than it seemed to Jason that night. The head of a shark with dead eyes, long arms with claws, and white sneakers, shiny from moisture. He looked at them and opened his mouth full of teeth, from which viscous saliva dripped. Jason raised the gun and fired. The bullet hit the chest, but only caused a roar. The creature rushed forward. Sarah shouted the words from the ancient text found in the library. The monster slowed down, but did not stop. It crashed into Jason, knocking him off his feet. He felt its claws near his face, heard sneakers squeaking on the wet ground. Sarah continued to shout the spell, her voice breaking, but she didn't stop. The monster twitched, as if pulled by an invisible force towards the lake. It roared, scratched the ground, but its legs themselves led it to the water. With the last words of the spell, it fell face down into the black surface. The water boiled, waves rose, and then everything subsided. Jason and Sarah stood, breathing heavily. The lake was quiet, but they knew this was not the end. A week later, everything went back to normal. People began to return, shops opened, children ran on the streets again. But Jason couldn't sleep. Every night it seemed to him that he heard footsteps. And one day, he woke up and saw wet footprints of sneakers on the floor by his bed. He understood. It had returned. It never goes away forever. It's just waiting. And at that moment, the sound of stomping was heard outside the window.